This is our customer panel. We kind of name this extending Fastly, your app to the edge with Fastly. So that'll be kind of a theme, but what I would like more than anything else is just to have some stories shared, maybe teach some lessons, learn about some of the lessons learned, and just have like a casual conversation for the next 29 minutes and 50 seconds. So what I'd like to start with is if you don't mind just introducing yourselves and who you work for and what you do, and then we'll just sort of go from there. Go ahead.
I'm Kathleen Vignos. I am the Director of Engineering at Wired. And our stack is several servers on AWS. And we have Memcache for object caching, and we have a F5 load balancer. And then we've got Varnish servers independently of Fastly, and then Fastly as our CDN.
Sounds great. Chris?
Oh, and I should have said the back end is WordPress.
My name is Chris Buckley. I'm the Director of DevOps at Business Insider. We have a mix of bare metal and Amazon using a pretty standard web stack, PHP, MongoDB, with a Varnish layer, which is moving to Fastly as we speak. Of course, a CDN as well.
Yeah, my name is Patrik Torstensson, architect at Spotify. Our stack is way too complex to speak about here, but we do a lot of our music streaming through custom protocol, but also over HTTP. We do also video streaming, more classic video streaming, Dutch, HLS. Also, we have a pretty standard web stack, and sadly enough, also WordPress. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you describe your stack, which is great. I think that sort of gives everybody an idea of the environment you work with. Just so we have an idea of your business, what do you think, or what are your like big business challenges? What are the things that are technically the biggest hurdles you find yourself trying to jump over?
The most important thing for us is that the site be up on the front end for our users. And that means that if a big story breaks and we get a ton of traffic and 1 million page views in a day or more, we need to be able to serve that traffic, and we need to be able to serve the ads to that traffic so that we get the revenue associated with a great story. And we also need to make sure all of our analytics are working properly so we can kind of get credit from that side as well. So for us, we need to never serve a 503 ever on the front end, which has happened with our previous CDN provider, but has not happened on Fastly, I'm glad to say. And then, I would say the secondary need is to make sure that our writers and editors can use the system in the admin. So we need to have a lot of uptime for them as much as possible. So if there's problems on the admin, people can use other ways of writing, use word processing or something like that in the meantime. So we can deal with that a little bit better, but yeah, definitely on the front end. It's got to be up all the time.
So we pretty much have exactly the same issues and concerns. Being online all the time is obviously the main concern. Being fast, we have a lot of competitors. We're vying for higher comScore, statistics so we can show pretty graphs. And if we're not fast, then people will just go somewhere else. And also, our CMS is really important. That's the content creation tool. And the reason why people read us is because we create that content. So if it's not there, then we're dead in the water.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm the different one here. For us, even from the start, we've been profiling ourselves as an instant startup playing music. So latency has always been extremely key for us. And we are in around 60 countries now, so we have a huge footprint, distributed footprint, so latency has always been critical. We're proven we're a freemium service, and we're proven latency is the best way of converting users from free to premium. If we have bad latency in a country, our conversion rates goes down. So it's very directly connected to the performance we're delivering. Same goes for our new video efforts that we launched a month ago or two now. So latency is the biggest hurdle, technical hurdle, as internet is not that great everywhere.
So let's use that as sort of a jumping off point. Let's talk about performance and latency. So I think we have a general idea of what that means to you, but can you talk about, actually all you guys, but we can start at the end with Patrik. What latency, like what is performance to you? And maybe talk about how you measure it and what events or what sort of fluctuations alarm you. Like at what point is it not good enough, things like this?
Sure, and it's a bit different between, so we also have quite high latency requirements on our website because most our payments still go through the websites. In-app IAP is moving forward, but it's not as big. So that side is quite much easier. It's much just having the site up and deliver it quickly. When it comes to music delivery, it's a bit different. We have a quite advanced system of how we're delivering files, music files, to avoid latencies. But it's all about time to first byte and time to first 64K. It's the important part for us. And we measure that from client side a lot, as we have fat clients, a lot of the fat clients. So every client logs this and it goes into a huge Hadoop cluster. We do real-time analytics on it also, and we do alerting on it. We do alerting on the other side, like if we see dips in bandwidth in certain regions, we do alerting on that. But mostly we track those two metrics and time to play. So we measure from when the user clicks play to we send music to the audio stream on the device. It varies a bit how much we can track there. Some devices gives callback saying now we're playing, some doesn't. But we try to capture the end user experience, and that's the main metric that we track.
So for us, we have a lot of ad networks and a lot of advertising, and they can be incredibly slow sometimes. So us getting our page out to the users as quickly as possible is the best that we can do in order to, combat some of that stuff. I'm personally more concerned about the app performance before it leaves, but the executives and the powers that be place a lot of faith in things like Chartbeat and Catchpoint, and those statistics really matter to them, particularly, how we're doing in comparing to, our competitors. So, performance for me is just like getting that page out there quick so that all of the asynchronous and third-party stuff can do their job to slow it down as much as possible.
Sounds like there's a component of it for getting things to the clients, and then the measurements that you make on the clients to make sure things are rendered well and are perceived well from the client side.
Right,
that makes
right.
sense, yeah.
And there are some third parties that are quite unstable, and we've actually considered putting Fastly as a front end to them and caching their content so that we can actually just keep delivering it quickly.
It's a great idea. Just 1 second. Third party. I think you're being very generous by saying some third parties are slow. That's very generous, I think. Yes. You have any? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time looking at front-end performance. I mean, the technical team looks at back-end performance, definitely, but we want to keep the load on the server low, but our stakeholders are most interested in how fast the site loads. And you can look at, page load time, but and also we've had a lot of stakeholders pushing us on Google page speed lately, which isn't, I don't think, a great evaluation of how fast the page is loading. So we did some things that we were asked to do that were good for our performance anyway for Google page speed, and luckily they've kind of laid off on demanding that we get a certain score. So we just really focus on start render and not just even the exact seconds or milliseconds that we're getting on the web page tests, but also how the site feels. How fast does it feel like it's loading? Looking at the screenshots and the videos, you can see what elements of the page are starting to load so that you can serve a little bit of the page and the user's getting that feeling like, okay, it's coming. I'm willing to wait for this page to load because I can see something's happening, as opposed to, there's just a white screen, forget it, I'm gonna bounce. So that's what we're focused a lot about, and we're looking at different things that we can do to load particular CSS that's needed first and asynchronously load other CSS later. Of course, we've moved JavaScript to the extent that we can at the footer and all of those things. We need to improve our image loading times, and we're hoping that that's something that Fastly can help with. We need to do more with compression and resize, serving the exact proper size at the right device size, viewport, and we're working on that. But we do lazy loading and things like that, at least for now.
We're big fans of web page tests. We sponsor one of their test nodes. Like we're friends, and we're big fans of that tool. That's great. If you haven't used it, you got to use webpagetest.org. It's awesome. Is your strategy any different with mobile, or is it basically the same, just on a smaller? Is it basically the same, or is there any notion of it, any part of it that's different?
We used to have a separate mobile delivery mechanism, and we're happy to be responsive now. So we have the same site in all devices, which is great. So I would say strategy is consistent.
We sort of have the same strategy. Our site is responsive, so the same code base and the same clusters are sending the content to mobile as the desktop. On the app side, it's a little different because that's API-based, so there's a bit of a different caching strategy with that because there's some authentication and that kind of stuff that sits in the front end. We treat mobile the same as desktop and just serve it the way they want it. But image optimization is a big thing. Our writers, they like to resize images and crop them to all sorts of crazy sizes, and we have to be able to support that on the fly. Right. So we have a very overly complex way of dealing with that, and also, we would be super interested in something that Fastly could provide to help.
Okay, one more star. Right.
Yeah, I mean, our apps is very different between mobile and desktop for sure. There is, but when it comes to the content delivery part of it, it's not a huge difference. It's a bit different on the video side, depending on how we deliver manifests for the different clients. But that's mostly because of the player stacks being so different between the devices. The basic of how we are delivering content and the big chunk of it is the same. Of course, the mobile app in itself uses different type of APIs, different type of authentication, depending on if you're mobile or if you're web or if you're desktop, as we have a desktop app also. But in general, we're trying to minimize the amount of ways we communicate with our clients. Yes.
Right.
So
I think that I think the stage is well set for us to get into some nitty gritty. Tell me about your caching strategy. Tell me about your CDN strategy. Tell me about how you sort of view that service or that add-on to your stack. Let's talk about CDNs and caching. Go ahead.
Sure. Our strategy changed a lot. I would say we didn't really have a strategy to start with, I suppose. You're a startup, you want to start delivering content to people, you do something. It started in the basement, more or less, and then moved to a data center. We invented our own communication protocol really early for our desktop apps. It's a single connection, it's multiplexing, it uses its own streaming protocol, therefore. We did the mistake of intermixing data and control plane on the same channel, so we're delivering data from our data centers. So content delivery from us from the beginning has been something very tightly coupled with how we are controlling the client. And when I say control, I mean things like search or showing an artist page, which is partially content, but it's also a lot of back and forth data with our backend systems. Delivering music files is in principle extremely simple today. It's just sending bits, and it's not a lot of bits, to be honest. But lately, we sat down and made a strategy about this, which is we want to have a multi-tier architecture when it comes to content delivery. So we are using multiple public CDNs, but we're also using private CDN, and we're using Fastly for hosted CDN in our own data centers. So we have 4 big data centers around the world. And to enable us to deliver, as we used to deliver this over our own connectivity between clients, we're now moving that to a private CDN instead. So client will talk HTTP to our data centers as they do to the public CDN, and we can switch in between depending on what kind of load conditions we have or where we want to push traffic from. So we have a big directory service that allows us to redirect users depending on the his number, country, a lot of things, if they should go to what CDN or to our data center. So long term, we're seeing that we'll continue to have a number of the publics, and we'll put quite a lot of traffic, but we'll also have our own. And the reason for that is that we have a lot of ISP or a lot of telco partnerships, and a lot of those require us to deliver content from within their networks. So it'll be a mixed strategy for us going forward, but we now have a plan what we want to do long term.
And I imagine having owning the client side of things gives you some flexibilities that maybe those of us who do things on browsers don't necessarily have, right?
We have a lot of flexibility when it comes to doing content redirecting of content routing, I would say, and we do it aggressively, and we have to, because some of the CDNs does not support zero rating, hence they don't support us giving us the IP addresses we're talking to, so we need to route those to the CDNs that does. Fastly does, which is good. So we have to do a lot of routing. We also have a lot of countries where we have performance problems between different telcos, so we need to route users to certain CDNs depending on telco and stuff like that.
Right.
So it is a mess, but therefore we need a support system.
Kind of sounds like a fun mess, though. Yeah, it can be fun. What about on the publishing side? Strategy, caching.
Yeah, so, for a long time, it was pretty stock standard CDN for static objects, and then just serve the PHP from our data centers. We then implemented Varnish. We didn't really have a caching strategy, but we put in Varnish. We spent a lot of time creating a lot of custom purge logic, that kind of stuff, because when an article's updated, it's featured on a lot of random pages that all need to be purged instantly. And, so that gave us a huge performance boost. But having our data centers on the East Coast, we see a lot of latency to the West Coast, and particularly internationally. So, moving our VCLs to the edge is a huge win for us, and we've seen performance improvements globally. So our caching and CDN strategies are exactly the same. Cache it, serve it, have logic behind it.
Sounds great. Kathleen, what do you think?
Similarly, we didn't have much of a strategy other than caching assets and images out at the edge. And so I think we've gradually added more complexity to all of our layers of caching. So we're getting better at caching objects in the back end so that our queries, big queries are cached, and then our back end is lighter. And then being able to do full page caching with Varnish is a great improvement that we've seen over the last couple years. We're doing some interesting things on the edge with regards to live blogging and shortening the TTL on live blogs so that we can get really quick responses back and be able to get posts coming in at every 15 seconds. So you really feel like you're part of an event. I know that we definitely want to be moving toward HTTPS and TLS, and so we're glad to see that on the roadmap. We definitely need to be thinking about security, and we're glad that you're going to be protecting us against DDoS, since Wired's certainly a kind of a target, since we write about those kinds of people. Yeah.
That makes sense. So if I remember right, like from 9 minutes ago, you both have Varnish in the data centers and also, Fastly's Varnish-based. So that's actually a good sort of transition we talk a lot, and obviously the name of this thing is extending the app to the edge. We talk about that a lot. And the first time it sort of made sense to me was when somebody said, well, you're kind of Varnish as a service, which I hadn't actually thought about before. So I think that's maybe a good segue to a little conversation about doing things at the edge. So we think of CDNs as a place where you can cache things at the edge, clearly, but there's a lot of logic that you can also run at the edge. Eddie talked about routing earlier. We see our customers do plenty of other things. Tell me about interesting things that you're doing in that world that sort of, you've taken things that you were maybe doing at some point at home and have it at the edge, or you'd like to be doing some things at the edge. Let's talk about that notion of this distributed model, things at the edge, also things at home. We can start with you, Kathleen.
Well, you sort of mentioned this idea that, which something that we mean to add is the webhook, so that as soon as you publish something in WordPress, you're clearing cache at the edge immediately in all the appropriate places. So that is something that we're moving, that maybe would have been something we would have cleared at the object cache level, and we're going to push it all the way out to the edge.
Right. Chris, what do you think?
For us, we do a lot of header manipulation. For example, any request that comes in with a cookie, we actually strip it out. We set it into a header that goes to the backend request. Because the majority of our content that we're stitching together is static anyway, it doesn't matter if you have a cookie, if you're logged in or not. You're still getting the same post, for example. So stripping out the cookies and sending them back to the application, and they can use the headers if they want, or if they need them, if it's a secured part of the site, or they can just drop that header on the floor and serve it. So it allows us to cache a lot of content, even though we've got cookies with all of the requests. What else? We're doing a lot of URL redirection. We have a massive list of redirects that I like to call the history of bad decisions at BI. It's we'll call something this, and then there's a redirect that'll now redirect it to this because we changed our mind, and then we changed our mind again, and then again and again and again and again. So we have a massive list, so we don't lose the SEO and all that kind of stuff. I guess that's really about it. And the custom purging,
Right.
With us sending headers back to our current varnish, moving over to Fastly surrogate keys it was pretty simple, because we're already sending headers. We just have to send different headers. So that's been really great, and it's really eased our process into doing the caching.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I remember looking at your VCL when I was visiting you once, and it was adventurous. So
Yes.
I'm glad that's happening. That's great.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah. Patrik, what do you think?
I think we are doing things. We're doing a lot of security things to protect the content. We do token authentication in a lot of different forms. I will sadly not go into them, as it's protecting our content. But we are using VCL quite heavily on that side. We do some smart things about our manifests, the video manifests getting delivered to the clients in VCL. This is always a tough call for us because we have the other CDNs also. So the question is, how much of the VCL do we use at edge versus others? We're doing some imaging stuff, of course. Everyone is that. But it is interesting. Compute at edge is getting more and more interesting, and there is a lot of interesting use cases for it. So.
Right. So what's a thing you wish you could do at the edge? If we were to do more things for you at the edge, what's a thing that you would wish Fastly would do for you at the edge? We can just start back from Patrik.
Yeah, for us, and this is very specialized use case, but that's something we have to do soonish, closer to the user, is a lot of audio manipulation on streams. So you will see us release more and more products where you can do a lot of custom transitions between songs and stuff like that. And in a streaming world, we need to do that close to the user, especially to devices that doesn't support that themselves. It can be quite heavy computation stuff, or heavy at least for we have a lot of speakers out there that supports Spotify, but don't have a lot of compute power, more or less doesn't have any compute power. So we need to do that in cloud and as close to the user as possible. That's really an interesting thing to do at the edge for us. And there is a few other things when it comes to authentication and authorization that we want to do at the edge. Right. We're doing some logging at the edge also today at the Fastly that we do. We put request IDs so we can follow requests through the whole system and things like that. So, but that's, yeah.
Chris?
So for us, there's two main things. We have our current mobile API. We're building a new API to power some of our backend services. So being able to put that in Fastly and have authentication on the edge would be really great, so our app doesn't have to worry about that stuff. And image optimization. I would love to be able to just point a backend to an S3 bucket, and through some magic that Fastly does, we can get the image sizes that we want, delivered quickly globally. Yeah, that's it.
Jason, you taking notes?
Kathleen?
Ditto image optimization. Also, we'd like to do some interesting things with personalization. Right now, we don't have logged in users, so it would be nice to do more at the edge based on refer. So if somebody comes to us from Facebook, we might show different content or maybe different sidebar widgets for that user versus somebody who comes to us from Instagram or any other refer. So we'd like to even get a better sense of, what this user might want to see next. They were first reading something in the business section, maybe they want more in business.
Right.
So, and how much we're going to do with having users log in to get that really personalized experience is still something that's part of our scoping on our product roadmap. But I think there's some really basic, simple things that we could do
Right.
at the edge. It would be really cool.
That would be really cool. This is going to sound a little self-serving, but I'm going to make it so it isn't. I'd love to hear about the one Fastly feature that you can't live without, but I'd also like to hear about the one Fastly feature that you absolutely must have that we don't have. Like, I'd love the dual dichotomy thingy there. So I would love to hear that. That would be really interesting, and maybe it'll resonate with what some of our audience wants. You want to have a crack?
Well, we're most of us here for instant purge, right? Having to wait 7 minutes to have something purged
Nice.
was, not ideal. But back to stale if error, being that to me is super important to know that we're not going to be serving up errors ever, and that we can be certain that we're fine with that. Means, I can sleep at night. And if our server is flagging or having a problem, it just buys us a lot of time to deal with the problem.
Right.
You don't feel like, oh my gosh, we're down the entire time that we're firefighting. It's like, it's fine. Users can't see what's going on. We can take our time, get to the root of the problem. Because
Right.
sometimes, you just slap on a fix and you never even know, what happened. So that's really important to me.
Awesome.
What you don't have,
Image optimization?
yeah.
Yeah.
More, yeah. That we serve a lot of great, big, beautiful images.
Right.
So the better we can do with that.
Chris?
So for us, in moving to Fastly, prior to Fastly, we bypassed Varnish for our SSL. And the developers put a lot of code in the PHP that sort of forces SSL in some places and forces it not to be SSL in other places. It's a little strange. So when moving to Fastly, we sort of had to tackle that problem. Being able to define different backends based on SSL and non-SSL, and keeping that SSL, or TLS, I should say, line from the client to the backend and back has been awesome. The one thing that we really need is multiple API keys.
Great. Nice. Patrik?
Oh, yeah. I think there's two things for us. One is just the hosted Fastly. It's becoming more and more critical for us. Otherwise, we would have built our own CDN software and done the same clustering you. And we are a company with 800 developers, so we could easily, we would have done it, which is sad. We've done things like this before, and it turns out we can't put as much resources and people on it as a separate company like Fastly. So I'm really glad that we found a company that did what we wanted there, and it's been really helpful for us. And we've done a lot of things together with you to get it to the point where we want to have it. So that's great. Then I lost the second thing. Going into what you're missing, and it's back to your point regarding the APIs, API keys, but in general also more real-time information. We use the syslog quite a lot, and we do correlation with the backend, but we are and want to have more performance metrics and tracking more metrics in general, and a good API for that would be great, and integration points.
Awesome. So we have a roadmap discussion later, so I hope that some of those things will be on there. Teaser. And thank you for that, because that's really valuable for us to hear. And I'm sure that it was mirrored with a lot of the audience. We have about a minute left. from all your experiences with CDNs, Fastly or otherwise, your experiences with this sort of in this world, if you were to have one lesson to impart upon this wonderful crowd, they should not leave here without this one lesson. What would that one lesson be?
Anybody want to go first?
Use Fastly support. They're awesome, and they've got me out of a lot of jams when I've been stuck on why parts of our VCL aren't working. So thank you, Fastly support.
Nice.
I think from my perspective, create a plan when it comes to content delivery and what do you want to accomplish long term, and how are you international, are you not, where are your users, how important is latency, how important is compute at edge, and then sit down and make a plan for it. Because some things, like we've been working on getting our web page online for a long time now, because it wasn't designed to be cacheable at edge.
Right.
And that's really something, if we have done this earlier, we would have had a better plan for it. It wouldn't have been perfect, of course, but yeah, I think that's really thinking through what you want to who you want to deliver content and through what means.
I would just echo something that Eddie from Target said, which was you can turn on Fastly overnight. You really can. We had the same experience. We actually had to launch a redesign and move to AWS and turn on Fastly on the same day.
Oh.
And we did not have any downtime.
Wow. And you have a great blog post about this, right?
Yeah, I did write it.
So there's a great blog post Kathleen has out there. You can look at, seek it. It's an amazing write-up.
One of these days I'll write up the details of the no downtime part of it. But anyway, I was really impressed. We also had great support from Fastly that day. But yeah, you really just kind of flip it on.
Awesome.
And there it is.
So we don't have time for questions, but they're here. If things that they said were interesting to you, which I'm sure they were, because that was very interesting, make sure to find them, chat with them, and have some good conversation. Thank you very much. That was very, very informative. Thanks for spending this time with us. We're gonna break for lunch now. One thing I gotta tell you about lunch, two things I gotta tell you about lunch. One, it's gonna be on both floors, so there'll be food everywhere. And there's going to be four tables upstairs. These are our AMA tables. Ask me anything, or 8 TAs, ask them anything. There's going to be 4 groups: security, support, development, and technology. I'm not exactly sure I don't know what development means. I know there were other ones, but there's going to be developers and technologists and our awesome support people and security. So if you have questions, want to have a chat while you're eating delicious food, that's going to be upstairs in that area, in that little lobby area. And we'll see you back in about an hour. Thank you. Thanks again.